Self-sabotage is the process of setting out to create and manifest one thing and ending up with something entirely different. And although it could be said that it's other people's fault, sometimes it is actually a delusion that we have in that we attach our lifelines to fantasies and to projections of the best of people. And as a result, we're surprised when we see what's on the other side of that rainbow, when we're expecting a pot of gold and there's this evil looking troll that is trying to take our money, do some other weird stuff. It happens, right? And that is an opportunity for us to reflect on how we see the world and process other people's intentions and motivations, and how we lose sight of our own intuitive process. Because when we retrospectively look back, there was always a moment, there's always a sign, always a feeling. And very often there are numerous ones that creep up on us. And so, even in this example, self-sabotage is not listening to ourselves, repeating the mistakes of our past, not using discernment, falling prey to this illusion that we live in a world where we don't have to exercise judgment or hold people accountable. And I find that some of the most shadowy characters are very, very quick to cite things like unconditional love and not judging, and especially in a religious context or a spiritual context, sort of like, let's hold ourselves to these ideals. Never mind, don't look the man behind the curtain. Don't point out that the emperor has no clothes. And it's an interesting way of actually letting shadow run rampant to get people to not ask questions, to not challenge their authority, and to point in the direction of utopia, idealism, and to say, well, we should all just embrace love, kindness, and no judgment, aka no discernment. There is another form of self-sabotage, and that is seeing people clearly, appraising them clearly, and showing up to your side of the relationship table with the intent of co-creating something very magical and beautiful. But something happens, and it can be on their side, both your sides, but you don't get to where you set out to go. It's like if you have a map and you want to put in a destination, you want to go to the mountains. Let's just say Mount Shasta, for example. And you're driving there, and all of a sudden, you start veering off on an exit that you didn't plan on taking. And then you end up going on a different highway and a different series of roads, getting further and further away from the destination that you wanted to set out in. And oftentimes, when we're in the realm of shadow work, this other destination is not always desirable. How does that happen? How do we end up at the wrong place, the wrong time, in the wrong town when we set out to go to the beautiful mountain, to resonate with our partner, whoever that is, our friend, our business idea, and then we end up taking a left turn into no man's land, sometimes going down into the pits of hell to walk on coals, trial by fire, confronting our demons and our shadows in some of the most exaggerated forms. This happens because we can have an idea of what we want to create, but we might not have the skills or the readiness to get there. I have to say that again for somebody in the back. We can envision this grand future, but we might not yet be capable enough in building the foundation and the avenues and the relationships that will actually bring it into fruition. This is where working with a mentor, a coach, can really help you. Somebody to help you illuminate the blind spots, even friends that can really keep you accountable. And I don't mean the yes friends who just tell us the nice things. Oh, it's great. It's great. Yeah, you should definitely do it, with no discernment. But the ones that will challenge you and keep you on your toes and rub at you like sandpaper. Are you sure? I don't know. Have you thought about this other way? And not the ones that will say that as a way to bring you down, but the ones who genuinely have your best interest at heart. You know, you have friends like that, right? Hopefully. If not, you should definitely get some new people in your life. It's worth spending time alone and removing people that don't have your best interest at heart, or those that are vying for taking over your stature or stabbing you in the back and all of those lower sentient things. At some point we grow old. It's not age and human years, but we grow past that maturity wise. Like we don't have time for that. We just don't. This is like reindeer games. So fundamentally, what breaks down is this. You believe that your skill set is stronger than it is. That's all it is. It's just a matter of skills and practice. And so you think to yourself, I've got a great idea for a business venture, or I want this type of relationship, a consciousness relationship, or the love of my life relationship. And then it starts to manifest in your life. But your part of the creation, let's just focus on your part. Your part of the creation falls a little bit short, and it does so because when confronted with challenges or obstacles, you either don't have enough staying power or you fall into old cycles of sabotage that actually interfere with that manifestation fully coming into its fullest potential. So, for example, it can look like this. And I work with people that struggle with this. So I intuitively and professionally understand this. When you are thinking about a new relationship and you're starting to embark on it, at first, you might not be very challenged because you don't really understand the risk versus the reward. And then as you start to really lean into the attraction and the magnetism, especially if this is a soul contract where it has more weight to it, it's going to activate you in ways that you perhaps have not been activated before. And I work with a lot of people actually that will either be at a level of personal work that they're almost, up until this point, they're almost never active because they've spent years working on themselves, until they get to like a twin flame relationship and they're like, wow, oh my God, I thought I healed this. And now it's coming all the way back up again, but it's at a different level. So it's not like you're starting from ground zero, because people that have done a lot of personal work, there's levels to the personal work. And so this is an opportunity that self-sabotage can strike you like a cobra. Like you're walking along thinking everything's fine, and then boom, you have a shadow pattern that reaches out and grabs your ankle, sinks its fang into your flesh, and then injects poison, and you start convulsing like a mad person. And depending on your pattern, you can create turbulence or waves where you can start to chip away at the intimacy. Because if you're working with a high value partner, there's going to be a certain level of compassion and understanding. But if you really slip into some crazy behaviors, a high value partner is not going to stay around very long for that. They're just not, especially if you're jeopardizing their health or security, or they're going to have a set of boundaries. And the toxic level codependent behaviors that we could get away with when we were still unhealed doesn't really translate to some of the higher consciousness relationships. And it doesn't matter what the connection is, because people will send you off on your healing journey and say, maybe you should go work with the karmic and let's cycle back. And we'll touch base after your next round of healing. I don't think I'm the partner for you to work through this. And so you want to be mindful of your reactions. And this is where working with a shadow work coach can really save you. And I literally work with people through some of these slippery situations and conversations, because it can be very challenging to navigate when you're very highly triggered. But it's very important to be very mindful of how you are showing up in your relationships. Because what happens is you thought you were okay because you were dealing with people that weren't challenging you at that deep, deep, deep fundamental level. And they were challenging you like you were playing water polo in the shallow end of the pool. Your relationships are hard, but you kind of got the hang of them, and you've done your healing work. You've healed some major, major obstacles. So you no longer need a lifeguard when you're in the shallow end of the pool playing water polo to watch your back. You've pretty much got it, right? But venturing out into some of the deeper soul contract territories, like twin flames, that is like next level. And so a lot of people are surprised when the floor falls out from under them and they start flailing around ungracefully in the pool. And this is the time to really lean into whatever your spiritual practice is. For mindfulness, journaling, I highly recommend. If you're not big into journaling, then make voice notes to yourself and talk to yourself on like a journal app or a diary app, and get it out. What you want to do is you want to analyze yourself from a higher perspective. I like to call this installing another seat of awareness. I have an episode about this if you haven't listened to it. But essentially, you need another observer function running in your brain, watching you, watching the inside of you, your feelings, your triggers, your wounds, your reactions, and then the outside, how you're behaving as a result. Because what happens, self-sabotage is all about the unconscious patterns, and they can be very insidious. We think we're responding, but sometimes we're creating. I'll say it another way. We think that we're justified in our responses to somebody else, but when you really start to unpack everything, it's a perceptual error. So we're judging their behavior, the fact that they didn't text us at a certain cadence or they didn't respond in a certain way can trigger somebody that still has attachment wounds, even though they may not have been triggered by people in the past for a really long time. They can start to instinctively fall back on some of those behavior patterns, like pulling away or testing the other person or apologizing for caring and slipping back into the 3D unconscious, creating distance and even being dismissive in some cases, depending on what attachment style they have. And so as a result, what happens is that they think that they're responding appropriately. But what they're responding to is the projection of their mind that is pulling in the past hurts into the present moment. and automatically making these assumptions based on pattern recognition, which I would say is erroneous pattern recognition in many cases, especially when you're operating at a high level of conscious frequency with another person and a soul contract. And especially with twin flame types of dynamics, we will be paired with people to shake up our idea of what love is supposed to be. So somebody can love us, but not in the way that we expect. And it's about learning what unconditional love really is, and not about checking the boxes. I have another episode on box checking you can check out if this resonates. But essentially, we come with this preloaded program of expectations that's based on our upbringing and our experiences. And we set this, really, it's almost like this litmus test that says, okay, if they're responding to me at a certain time, if it feels a certain way, then it's love. But this isn't love. It's not love at all. It's box checking. And as a result, we can have feelings and negative reactions based on how somebody is showing up to their side of the relationship, because we start to feel insecure. We start to feel like, do they not feel the same? Do they not value this? The mind can go in a lot of different directions. And this is where self-sabotage is prime. Because then what happens is we then say, oh, well, they're pulling back, then I need to pull back. When it could just be that they're actually caught up, they're busy, or they're thinking, because they process emotions differently than you do. So they need to feel into it. They're not as verbal. They're more showy. They want to show their affection. And to do that, they need time to think about how they want to show it. If you're verbal, then it just like is so quick off the tongue, right? So you're like, well, there's no excuse. They should say something. No, people don't always work that way, But we discount that when viewing other people's behavior. And then we create these narratives and these stories that we insert on top of them. And then we respond not to them, but to our interpretation of them. You see how it's a trap? And this, in my opinion, is what creates a lot of the turmoil and drama and the separation, unnecessary separations that we see in the struggle of soul contracts, particularly twin flame dynamics, where this is so rife. It's just so exaggerated. And so as a result, you might think that you're appropriately responding. But what you're doing is you're actually throwing stones, pulling the rug out from under somebody, or creating turbulence energetically, pretending that you're fine, but energetically, you're throwing swords or daggers because you're responding to past hurts instead of in the moment. And you're drawing these conclusions that, well, I must be overly invested. Almost everybody does this who struggles with this self-sabotage wound, the attachment wound that's still unresolved. They'll make all these assumptions like, well, clearly they don't feel the same way. Clearly they don't this and that. I need to pull back. I need to protect myself. And it's that protection that we then fail to co-create in the highest vibration of love. We are then slipping into the vibration of fear, vindictiveness, dismissiveness, and punishment in some cases, because there could be punishment there too. And so this is why when we want to go to Mount Shasta, to pull it back to that example, we end up in a seedy hotel in Las Vegas with crack addicts outside of our door, wondering what the hell happened? How did we get here? And it happens because we ourselves start creating with fear in these lower vibrations that magnetize other situations to us that we don't necessarily plan on. But this is how the world as our mirror helps us to understand how our subconscious mind is reflecting reality to us and how we preferentially latch on to those fear narratives and to those seedy Vegas hotels versus going to this amazing high vibrational retreat with our beloved Mount Shasta. And this is what self-sabotage is about. And the purpose of shadow work is to consciously and intentionally understand these patterns and to transcend them by choosing to show up differently and by loving even in the face of fear, or by creating with the highest intention and surrendering to the highest outcome instead of subversively trying to control or manipulate or reject or dominate because somebody isn't showing up the way that we think they should.